Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a new video. So this is my 2018 F80 M3 competition, and before we start modifying this car, making it my own, start changing it up, how it looks, feels, and sounds, I want to give you guys my initial impression of this car completely stock. That way you guys will have a good idea of what this car feels like right off the bat, right off the showroom floor basically. So it gives you guys an idea of where I stand, how I feel about the car currently, what areas I possibly think could be changed and addressed and improved. Not only am I going to give you guys my initial impression, but I'm also going to let you guys know a question that I literally get on the daily. You know, do I miss the STI? Is it a good jump up from the STI? Is it something that people should consider coming from a car like that? You know, is the F80 M3 worth it? So I want to answer these questions, go over my thoughts, opinions, my feelings about it in its complete stock form before we start modifying, and let you guys know what I think about the F80 M3. All right, guys, so we're heading off in the F80, going for a little cruise, and I just figured I would kind of take you guys along, let you guys know what I think of the F80 after driving it for an extended period of time. I've had the car for a little over a month now. I've been driving it as much as I possibly can. So one thing that's really prevalent that I've noticed in the F80 M3 is that it is just extremely practical. Now I'm in a very fortunate situation that I don't need this car as my daily driver. I have something else that I drive every single day in bad weather and all that. I live in the Northeast, so having something different is just kind of what I prefer. But if I had to drive this car every single day, year round, I would have no problem doing that. Great thing about this car is that I can fit my kids in the back, my wife in the front, well, at least most of my kids in the back. I have three. Putting 3 car seats across just not going to happen in here, but once they're out of car seats, there'll be no problem fitting in here. The trunk space is pretty decently big, and I mean, there's so many amenities in this car, it's pretty crazy. Having Apple CarPlay, just having heated seats, heated steering wheel. Honestly, it's very, very hard to find a car that does it all. I mean, you can take this car to the track on the weekends, you can rip it around, have a lot of fun, drive it home, go to work on Monday, drive your kids to school, go pick up groceries, take some back roads and have some fun. You can go to car shows, you can do everything with this car, and it does it very, very well. It's extremely fast. It's 444 horsepower. I think it's around 406 or something like that in terms of torque. And it's just an absolute blast to drive. Now, one of the big things that I really do like about this car is that it is so simple. It's one of the main reasons why I'm always drawn to BMWs. Yes, over the years, they have gotten a little bit more complex in terms of the amenities and all that, but just overall, the simplicity of the layout is what I love about it. That is one of the things I loved about my STI, was that it was just purely just focused on driving. All the amenities and all the different options that you could possibly get in other cars, you know, that didn't get in the way of just being a driver's car. And I feel like that this is really the same thing. Yes, there's a lot more to it than the STI, but overall, it's just so simple. You know, there's nothing to distract you. Everything is laid out very well. Everything is very high quality and built nice. You got the nice carbon all over the car and everything. Factory, I should say. And it's just a real treat getting in this car and driving it, especially coming from something like the STI. You know, you could really see the overall upgraded quality of everything. Just how it's put together, it just feels like a better built, put together car. Now, obviously, this car being manual is what makes it a lot of fun. The DCT that is offered in this car is fantastic, and to be completely honest, that car was designed around that transmission. Honestly, the DCT is fantastic. However, me being a kind of car enthusiast and true manual enthusiast, I guess if you want to call it that, having a manual in this car was a must for me. And I'm really, really happy to report that it is a great manual transmission. Older BMW manuals from the older generations, the manual just felt like a wet noodle. The clutch felt very, very kind of loose. The overall stick just felt terrible. I wasn't a big fan of them. Although still fun, it left a lot to be imagined. But with the F80, the shifter feels very notchy. There's no mistake of what gear you're going in. It feels way better than honestly I remember it ever feeling in any other BMW. So I'm happy to report, coming from the STI with the amazing 6-speed transmission, that this really is a nice kind of transition, nice next step. There is ways to improve it if you want to do that. I do wish it was a little bit shorter throw, which can be accommodated in the aftermarket world. But overall, it feels really, really good. I'm very happy with it. I have no gripes about it. And yeah, I definitely will be making some upgrades in the future, just out of my own personal preference. But otherwise, getting into a BMW F80 M3 and a manual transmission, I have no gripes about it, and I think it's great out of the box. Now, a point that I made earlier was that it is such a kind of daily driver friendly car. And one of the great things about it that I found was getting into this, there was really no kind of learn time. There was no kind of figuring things out. Everything just felt very easy. It's very driver friendly. Anyone can get in this car that basically knows how to drive a manual transmission and can do it. It's really not hard to kind of get used to it. I was used to this car within like 10-15 minutes of driving it, whereas the STI took a decent amount of time to drive. That car, to drive that smoothly, if you ever driven one, is not the easiest thing. It does take some time. It does take some practice to be able to drive that car smoothly. Obviously tunes and stuff will help that, but the M3, the F80, it reminds me of like an iPhone. It's just, you get in, you know what to do. It's very easy to kind of navigate and use. And I'm really happy to report that, I'm just so used to this car. I feel really comfortable in it already, which is a great thing. Now, in terms of gas mileage, I think I'm getting around, let's see, I'm getting 18.3 right now. I just drive around town. I don't do much highway driving at all. I have in this car, but not very far, or not very often, I should say. I definitely seen around the mid-20s for this car in terms of gas mileage. So if you're looking for something over 30 in terms of gas mileage, then maybe this is not the car for you. But I mean, you're driving a 444 horsepower M3 sedan that you can haul all your friends and family in. So gas mileage probably isn't your main concern. I figured I would mention it since some people do care about the gas mileage, and it may be a determining factor if you want one or not. So there you go, 18.3, kind of driving around town every day. Not too bad. So now that we kind of talked about how much I love the car, how much I enjoyed it, I figured I would mention these three things because they are worthy things to talk about. The electronic steering. This is my first car with electronic steering. Every other car I've had before that, or before this one, has been hydraulic. So this is my first experience with something a little bit different, and I gotta say, it feels fantastic. It really, honestly, for the type of driving that I do, it's not a noticeable difference. And it's really cool to be able to change the overall feel, the terms of heaviness of the actual steering wheel. You can go from comfort, sport to sport plus in terms of the actual weight of the steering wheel, which is great. And you literally just press a button. It's pretty amazing. Now, I really haven't driven this car through its paces yet. I mean, I've had some fun with it, but I haven't gotten to the point where I felt that the electronic steering was too much or I didn't like it. I personally think it's fantastic. I have no issues with it. So I figured that would be mentioned, coming from a bunch of hydraulic driven cars, hydraulic steering cars. And a lot of people do have questions about that, why I went with an F80 and not an E90X because of the electronic steering. But then again, I have no issues with it, and it's been great. Another thing to note is rev matching. I'm a big fan of being able to do that yourself, and I suggest learning how to do that before stepping foot into an F80, because the F80 M3 does auto rev matching, meaning anytime you drop a gear, it does it for you. It revs up to where it needs to be, and you just put it into gear. You sound like a race car driver, every single gear shift, every single downshift. It's pretty amazing. Don't get me wrong, I like doing it on my own, but I really don't mind the rev matching. I think it's a nice little feature. You can code it out if you want to turn it off completely. You have to do that through aftermarket coding from Bimmer Coding or BootMod or something like that. But otherwise, I have no issues with it. I think it's great. It doesn't bother me at all. And I got pretty familiar with it, and I got pretty decent at it from the STI, so I know that I'm more than capable of handling that. And it's kind of muscle memory, so I don't fear I'm gonna lose that technique, that skill over time. Last note I wanna mention is EDC, electronic damping control. I can adjust the comfort of the overall suspension at any point in time. Anytime I'm driving, I just press a button right over here, and I can change it from comfort, sport to sport plus. Definitely a big change from comfort all the way up to sport plus. It gets a little bit more firm. The car feels a little bit tighter and everything. I personally leave it in sport most of the time. I never really put it in comfort unless I'm driving a longer distance, but I think it's a great feature. This is my first car with that type of feature. Any other car I've had previously was just simple. Basically, how the car felt is how the car felt. You couldn't change it. The only way you can change that is obviously upgrading the suspension. I've used coilovers in the past, and you guys know I'm very familiar with that whole thing, but it is really nice to have that feature for stock, be able to adjust that on the fly, and just have a little bit more comfort. Again, it kind of goes back to the whole daily driver thing. You can adjust to what works best for you. All right, so now that we went over kind of all the pros and everything that I love about the car, let's start talking about the cons. Things that I don't necessarily like, some things that bother me. They're very nitpicky, but obviously I want to mention them. And also I want to go over, kind of a little bit of a comparison with the STI. Now, first things first, the exhaust note. The exhaust note on the F80 isn't the best thing. But I don't really think it sounds as bad as people make it out to be. I personally think it sounds great, although there is definitely room for some improvement. And the great thing about that is it's very, very easily to get that done with aftermarket options. There's some really, really nice examples and some nice aftermarket pieces that you can put on the car to make it sound very, very good. So I wouldn't necessarily take that as a con, at least in my opinion. I'm a little bit of an exhaust nut, so I will do everything in my power to try out as many different exhausts as I possibly can to find that specific exhaust note that I personally think sounds best. So one little nitpicky thing that I'm going to mention, I actually said this in my F87 M2 review, is that the HVAC system in here does not have a sync button. So basically, when you turn one dial down to a different temperature, the other side doesn't change. So if you have it at 65 and you bring it down to 60, the passenger side stays at 65. There's no specific sync button to press to make that even. Again, a nitpicky thing. I'm a little OCD, so that bothers me. So I have to turn both dials to make sure everything matches. But it's something that, I don't know, kind of bothers me. I don't know why they didn't put a sync button on the F80 M3. A con that comes with pretty much any German or any more expensive car is the costs. Now, for me personally, I didn't want to buy this car until I was 100% ready to afford it. Buying it and affording, I always say, are two different things. Buying, you're able to go out and buy the car, but you're going to be struggling to be able to maintain it, to modify it. But if something broke, you're going to be in a bad spot. Anytime I buy a car, I always want to make sure I'm in a position to be able to afford it. So I waited and waited until I was in that position to do it. However, it is something to mention, coming from the STI world, maintenance, super cheap. Going into the M world, very expensive. A little bit of an example, a full exhaust on the STI, catbacks. If you guys know me, I have ran many different exhausts on my previous cars. The most recent one was the STI. I forget how many different exhausts, but you can get a full catback for like $1,200-1,300 bucks. I spent over $1,000 on just one piece of this exhaust. So, and also to think a muffler on this car, you're looking at $2,000 to $3,000 bucks just for the muffler. So it just kind of comes with the territory. That's something that I call personally M-tax, maintenance modification, just because of the badge on here. People think they can jack the prices up. It doesn't necessarily mean things are better, but people do it, people will pay for it. And if you're in a fortunate situation to be able to afford one of these cars comfortably, the maintenance and the modifications and stuff shouldn't really affect you, but it is something to note that yes, it is more expensive, it is more pricey to modify and to maintain, and it's definitely something you should consider. All right, so pros and cons we went over. I love the car, very, very minor cons, but things that I thought will be important to mention. So let's start going into what I think you guys may be most interested in, and that is, how does it compare to my STI? Now keep in mind, I had a fully modified, pretty much full bolt-on STI that I owned for the last 6 years, that I spent a lot of time and effort making that car as perfect as I possibly could be, and I love that car immensely. So a lot of people ask me, how does it compare? What is it like? Do you miss the STI? And one thing that I always say when people do ask me that is, you're comparing apples to oranges. The M3 is in such a different category than the STI. Most people that are cross-shopping, when they were buying an STI new and they were buying an F80 M3 new, two different price categories. You're looking at a $35,000-$40,000 car to a $70,000-$80,000, plus $1,000 car. Not many people's budget are in that wide of a range. Usually it's kind of a little bit smaller, so it's kind of hard to compare. That's a turbo 4-cylinder car, and this is a completely different motor, inline, twin turbo, M car. It's just in a different category. So it's really hard to say which one is better, which one I prefer more. They're both fantastic cars. They're both cars that I truly think every car enthusiast should own at one point, just to appreciate kind of the journey, appreciate each car. I will say the STI was quite a bit more raw. And that makes sense. You know, the car obviously was, I don't want to say a economy car, but it was built more so just for the driving experience. It wasn't really built for the accommodations. It wasn't built for kind of the business executive, if you will. STIs in general were geared more towards the tuner world. You know, younger generations, younger kids, taking baby steps, getting their foot in the door into fun kind of sports cars. And, you know, the STI was just that. Although it has improved over the years in terms of the quality, I thought my STI was built very well. There was little to no creaks, even with everything that I did to it. So I was really happy with it. But, you know, it's just two different categories. I appreciate each one of them in their own ways. But there are some similarities. You know, I do think that this is a great progression from the STI. I think it's a really great step up. I personally think that the F80 M3 is the more grown up and kind of better built STI. You know, if you're kind of looking to make that step in your car journey to get a little bit better built, a little bit faster, a little bit kind of all around better car, it is a perfect transition. Ultimately, my end goal of my car journey of where I want to be is in some type of 911. That is just, to me, I think, the perfect car, and that is where I want to end up. However, jumping from an STI to a 911 is a really big jump. So going to an M3, I think, is a perfect transition to kind of get your foot in the door of experiencing a German, experience something that's a little bit more than the STI. And I truly believe the F80 M3 is a perfect transition car. It's a perfect kind of next step from the STI. So the question that you guys are probably asking, do I miss the STI? I do not. I don't miss it one bit. And the main reason for that is because I spent the last 6 years modifying, owning, enjoying that car to its fullest. And I truly feel that when I sold that car, I got my full ownership experience out of that car. I never felt like I left a stone unturned. I did everything I wanted to do to it. There was nothing that I felt like I should have done, I didn't do, or anything like that. The past 6 years with that car was amazing. And selling that car felt good because I felt like I got everything out that I wanted from it. So no, I don't miss it. I think it was a great ownership. I still think it's a fantastic car. No, I would never turn my back on my STI and WRX guys because I truly think it is a fantastic car. But moving to the M3, you know, I don't have any regrets. It's a great, as I mentioned, a great transition. So if anybody is looking to make that jump, is a little unsure if they should make that move to something like this, I 100% recommend it. Although I do say that you should take the time to enjoy, you know, the STI, the WRX before you move into this. Although I do think the M3 is a superior car overall, I don't think I would appreciate this car as much if I didn't have the STI for the 6 years. So yeah, there are my thoughts on the STI and F80 M3 comparison, the pros and cons. I hope this helped you guys if you are in a similar position of wanting to change or thinking of an F80 M3 from the current car you do have. I love it. It's fantastic. I really think it's a fantastic car. Huge aftermarket support, and it's a blast to drive. So now that you heard my thoughts, let's hop out of the car and wrap this video up. All right, guys, so that is going to wrap up my initial impression of my F80 M3. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As you can see, absolutely love the car. I think it is a fantastic step up from the STI. So if you guys are interested in an F80, I highly recommend it. I definitely recommend at least going to test drive one, feeling it out, see what you think. It is just a great transition from my previous car. I think it really suits what I was after, what I was looking for. Now that we got that out of the way, you guys know what I think of the car in its stock form. Let's get to modifying this car. Let's getting it to where I want it. Let's have some fun with this thing. I have so much planned for it. A lot of things are coming in for it. There's going to be a lot of install review videos, just like I did with my previous cars on the channel. So if you guys are interested in following along, highly recommend it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into this and making it my own and making you guys kind of a little bit more aware and understand this car a little bit better than you may not know currently. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. If you have any questions at all, be sure to ask them below. But in the meantime, keep it clean, keep it simple, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.